Welcome back. Please take your seats and welcome to the stage your conference MC, Laurie Stewart.
Thank you all. Welcome back. I'm glad to see you all in the room and jazzed up for the wrap-up of the day. We've got some really exciting stuff still coming, so hang on. We are thankful and excited to have with us today Jeff Shuck and Jennifer Mulholland of Plenty. They're going to guide us in realizing our vision for unlocking growth, both as individuals and as an organization. So please, won't you welcome to the stage Jeff and Jennifer.
Thank you, Laurie.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Laurie, and all of you. Again, my name is Jeff Shuck. This is Jennifer Mulholland. We're the co-leaders of Plenty, and as Laurie said, we're a consultancy that helps organizations, and we say idealists like you unlock growth. Over the last couple of days, you've been talking about the possibility and the promise of the Live Yes Network. And what we're going to do in the next 90 minutes or so is talk about the practicality of it, is talk about how we bring it to ground. How do we be champions in our own communities? How do we enlist other people in support in this vision that we have together? So to give you just a little bit of context on Plenty, Plenty has kind of two core principles that we wanted to introduce to you and that we're going to talk a little bit about with you over the next 90 minutes. The first, we say at Plenty that hope needs help. And what we mean is the world needs changing, right? We know it in our own passion for our mission, for our own passion to enlist people to be champions, that our dreams are ready for us, but hope can't work on its own. Hope needs us to help with it. And today we'll talk a little bit about what that kind of help means and what it means to be a help hoper.
The second principle is our worldview. Our vision is a world in which there's plenty for everyone. And we mean plenty of abundance and plenty of resources and plenty of healing, plenty of hope, plenty of resources, plenty of love. We reject the idea that we're actually competing with each other. We see in our work more and more that we're competing with a mindset, and it's called scarcity. It's a lack, it's a fear, it's a constriction, it's a belief that there's actually not enough to go around. And we see that in society, we see that in our family systems, we see that in our corporate culture. And so what we do at Plenty is really help awaken idealists to unlock growth by increasing revenue, impact, and personal fulfillment so we can help shift that mindset and unlock the resources that are available for everyone.
So this is what we're going to explore over the next hour and a half or so. Hour 22 is actually what it says right here. Kind of three parts. We're going to explore these themes of scarcity and abundance and hope and help and really the core idea of what it means to be establishing a network in a world that is networked. So we're going to start there. We're going to start with this idea of just what is our world now. And we're going to give you a little bit of context from our work and our experience with groups just like you about what is happening in the world. What does it mean to be a networked organization? What do networks need from us? So that's kind of part one. Part two, we'll look at how you see the world right now. Many of you took what's called the 5 Keys assessment. We'll talk about it. The results are in front of you from your organization. We'll give you a sense of seeing how everybody in this room views the potential of the Arthritis Foundation. And then in the third part, we'll talk about how we impact the world. So how do we enlist other people? What does it mean to be a champion? What does it mean to live yes? And how do we ignite other people to be part of that with us? So let's start with this idea. We love the Live Yes Network for so many reasons. And one of the reasons is we currently live in a time that is more networked than ever. And that's where we want to start.
So most of you know this. We're just going to review this for the sake of how do we really awaken the network? How do we mobilize communities? A traditional engagement is a one-to-one relationship. right? So the Arthritis Foundation has a direct relationship with a donor. We are going to ask for donations to contribute to the Arthritis Foundation. This is a traditional fundraising model. The alternative is a peer-to-peer engagement model where the Arthritis Foundation is really leveraging the influence of a networker to influence their community, their loved ones, their friends, to care about the Arthritis Foundation. Now, those donors, those volunteers, who do they care about? They care about the networker. And guess what? You all are that networker. You're that champion that you're mobilizing your communities, your boards, your friends, your loved ones to care about the Arthritis Foundation. So this is like a really important role of how we connect peer to peer, which is really person to person, which is really passion to passion. You'll hear us talk about this. We mobilize communities. Communities spawn around shared care. So when we share what we care about, vulnerably, authentically, we mobilize people to care about the same thing. So we want them to care about us and the Arthritis Foundation. And this is happening all over society. We're living in this word-of-mouth referral world where we share what we care about.
Yeah, and ironically, it's been accelerated by the technology that we all hold in our hands and the tools that we use. So a lot of our work at Plenty on the fundraising side is just helping organizations understand the networking model. And we have a quick example of the power of this, right? If you're thinking about it, all of those, one person, each of us has a network that can be, we had 4 little donors on the side, but your network is probably hundreds and hundreds of people. And here's an example of how powerful this can be. Okay, so this is, you'll see a few graphs from us over the next hour. We're not going to get too mathy on you, but this is a plot of a campaign that we advised on. The campaign happened in Detroit, Michigan. And the plot, the dot is not participants in the campaign. The dot is unique zip codes that from which a participant came. Does that make sense? And you can think of this as, in this case, it was an event, but you can think of this as a donor or an advocate or a volunteer. So the event physically takes place in Detroit. So where do you see most of the dots? Around it, you're participating, and we appreciate that. Yes, most of the dots are around Detroit. You can see, maybe just to go back, most of the dots are around Detroit, and you can see there's like one person coming from Puerto Rico. We appreciated that person. Person from New York, but in general, you know, it's a Detroit-based event. But here's what we did in that community. We asked people to engage their networks. This next slide that Jennifer is going to show you is the people that they mobilized to donate. So one community with about 3,000 people in Detroit mobilized literally thousands and thousands of people from around the country. Now, do you think the nonprofit in Detroit has relationships with people in California? No, they have relationships with networkers, people like us, people like you, who care passionately about something, care enough to ask their communities and their friends for support. So a lot of our work is helping groups leverage this. You know, we have so much power, each of us. So many people want to help us if we ask and influence in the right way. So that's just a little bit about peer-to-peer. We wanted to talk to you in our work. The world is changing rapidly, as you know, as you're living through. We wanted to talk to you, share with you 6 trends that we see impacting networks, that we see impacting organizations like you.
Yeah, so as we look at really unlocking growth for the Live Yes Network, these are themes that you can really pay attention to as you start to spread the message, as you start to enlist others for support, other volunteers and fundraising. The first is personalization. Donors they want to give to their passions. They don't want to give to our needs. They want us to listen. Again, communities spawn with shared care. Passions don't come from our heads. They come from our heart, and it's really the fuel. When we share with another vulnerably, authentically what we care about, when we share our story of why we care about Arthritis Foundation, it really lands for people in a very personalized way. So when we see organizations doing like a cookie cutter approach, they miss the mark. Right? because society doesn't want that. We all want to be seen and heard as special. We are special. We're unique. We have unique stories. So how do we personalize our message for somebody that we're speaking to, or a board, or our local, community to care about what we care about? So you'll hear us kind of unravel this theme of really sharing your story that is unique to you, that can land with somebody else to care about what we care about.
And a quick example of that personalization, think of, some of you look like you will understand this. I'm old enough to know when there were 3 channels on television, right? And then you had maybe a UHF channel, and you had that public channel that your parents made you watch. Well, we don't live in that world today, right? In that world, we chose what someone else wanted us to watch. Well, now many of you probably in your home have 1,000 things that you can choose from, and you don't watch TV anymore, even though you have all these choices, right? So in the same way, we need to understand that our donors are in a world where they don't want to fund what we're telling them to fund. The second part of that gets to our next thing on here is action. We've seen, boy, we could spend a day just on this. We've seen a really interesting trend over, I would say, the last 2 decades around donors really wanting, it sounds silly to say it, but wanting to make sure they get impact from their donation. It's not enough anymore for us to be a great cause and get that charitable, philanthropic gift. A lot of donors, and I'm not talking about just big, wealthy donors, I mean people like us want to see impact. They're specifically trying to create action through their donation. So what does that mean for us as we engage our network? Just like the first trend means we have to talk about what someone else needs as much as we talk about what we need. In this case, this also means then we have to show how we're making a difference. And less are we able to say, hey, give to us because we deserve it. We're going to hear our community say, well, why? Why do you deserve it? Show me.
Yeah, and what do you do with it? It's going to be a really important question to answer. The third is congruence. So walking the talk is more important than ever before, and you all know this. Our bullshit barometers are higher and more fine-tuned than ever before, right? We can sniff out when a company is not walking the talk or when somebody's not really being truthful. So there is a demand in society right now to have organizations practice what they preach. So for the Live Yes Network, how are we raising the emotional and social health of each other, right? When we're interacting, when we're mobilizing our communities, when we're at a conference like this. How do we really practice creating better access to care? We all have that opportunity to practice that out in our community and practice it with each other. And we're seeing we do so much work in the social impact sector, and we would say this is an epidemic. This is a real big problem where we were working with a really large cancer hospital and doing strategic planning and helping them come back to their core values. And one brave soul in the room said, this is all great and everything, we absolutely treat our patients this way, but we do not treat each other this way. And you could see it in the room. You could see how there was a total disconnect. And the patients can see that. Our customers, our constituents, our donors can sense that. So how do we close the congruency gap? That's up to each one of us to practice, because there's no instructions for it. There's no rules of how to do it. But you know what that compass is for you.
Yeah. The fourth one you're probably already feeling, those of you who've been involved with the organization for even more than a few years. The amount of competition in the social sector is really increasing. And one of the things that we tell our nonprofit clients is it's interesting. As an idealist, it's a really good trend, but as a fundraiser, it's sometimes hard to navigate. We're getting competition not from only nonprofits anymore. And next time you do watch television in one of those 1,000 channels that we talked about, watch how many for-profit companies advertise around social purpose or talk about creating a better world. One of the examples we use all the time is the IBM logo. Can you picture it? It's a planet, and creating a smarter planet. It's a very aspirational brand. Another example that we use is BP. BP's logo is a sunflower, right? So talking about creating a cleaner environment. That's probably something that BP couldn't have gotten away with 30 years ago. Why are they going into that place? Because people do want to make a difference. But for us, it means that our network, the people we want to mobilize, might not necessarily look at charity only as the way to make a difference, right? And so it's really cluttered things. And some of our most interesting clients in the past year have been for-profits who honestly, from a place of true desire to make a difference, are launching, B corporations, are incubating their own foundations or charities, are literally trying to bake social impact into their product sales. So we just live in a time where I think the point for all of us as we go back to our communities is realizing that the people we're talking to and trying to enlist in the network may not always see a nonprofit as the only alternative. So sometimes we have to position why we're better. Because for someone who is making a difference, we are a better choice. We can guarantee that more money goes to treatment and care and sharing. We can tell you that we are stewarding your dollars better. But more and more we have to make that case, and it's probably not a case that we needed to make a couple decades ago.
One other point about competition is we're really competing with time, right? Like, people's time is so precious today. They're doing a million things. We're just bombarded with a ton of roles and projects and responsibilities. So slowing down to really make that quality exchange of conversation, of asking for volunteerism, asking for support, that moment is so precious in the context of competing with time and choices. The fifth is transition. We are living through right now the largest wealth transfer in the history. Generational wealth being passed down to the younger generation. So we're seeing younger donors come into incredible resources and needing to know where is it best to fund causes to care about. And this is just an incredible groundswell. In some cases, we're not totally prepared as a society to help equip and empower these younger generations to lead with impact, but they care so strongly about where their funds go. And there's an incredible opportunity for us to unlock growth for the Arthritis Foundation and the Live Yes Network to speak to this new generation of leaders.
Yeah, and we're using the term donor here again, but would ask you to think more broadly into volunteers, advocates, constituents, supporters. It's not uncommon for us, particularly in larger nonprofits, to take a look at the donor database or the volunteer database and see, wow, the average age is 70. We literally look at databases where most of the people in it who are actively supporting the organization probably won't be alive in 10 years. So that's not 70, hopefully. But we see a lot of databases where the average age is 80, 85. So that's what we mean by are we ready for it? We have to start to... Now why is that usually the case? It's usually the case because wealth corresponds to age for most communities and most people. So it makes sense that most organizations kind of skew older when you look at the donor database, right? Because those people have more ability to give. But because a lot of organizations have built their fundraising that way, there's no real mechanism to engage people when they're 20 or 30 or 40. And what we can't assume is once someone becomes 45 or 50, that all of a sudden they know about us. Right? And that's what I think our big piece of advice here is we have to start to cultivate people earlier. It doesn't mean that a 30-year-old is magically going to be able to, donate 10 hours a week or give us 10% of their income, but we want them to start to know about us. And because of these other trends we're talking about, they might not know of us. So this is another potential of Live Yes, is getting people together to literally help one another. Our feeling is you're probably going to see a different kind of, younger, more diverse really interesting base of people, and that's going to be a huge positive for the organization over the next couple of years. You're going to be much more prepared for the generational change that's coming than I think a lot of our clients. That takes us to the last trend, which is going to take us into the 5 keys and your results, and getting you talk a little bit about your results. The last trend that we see, there's kind of 2 parts to this, is, you probably can't, you can't be alive right now and notice the trend towards well-being and mindfulness. You even there was a well-being event this morning. We popped our heads in. It didn't look incredibly populated, but there were some people in there.
Some hangovers last night.
Probably has to, yeah, right. The bar looked really well populated last night. But right, we all are learning this. We all are learning that in a time that's really rapid and hectic, we need to slow down. And there's huge corporations are leading this. Groups like Arthritis Foundation are leading this effort. So a great trend is that well-being is emerging as something that has to be a priority. On the flip side, I don't think we're being dramatic to say, from our work over the last year and a half, trying to measure, in part, well-being in this sector, which we'll talk about in a second, we really have a crisis in the social sector around well-being. And it comes from a great place, right? Whether we're volunteers or staff, we care a lot. And we often work ourselves to the bone. And some organizations, we're not saying, this is not Arthritis Foundation, but there's a model where we capitalize on that or take advantage of that passion because we need it. We have to be passionate, but we don't let people replenish. And we have clients that have staff turnover of 70% a year, 80% a year, 90% a year. Passionate people working to the bone, and the only way they give themselves a break is they quit. Well, our concern with that is, we said at the beginning, hope needs help. The world needs changing. Change isn't sustainable in those conditions, right? It's impossible to have continuity when our staff roster turns over 80% a year. So we've gotten really focused on this dynamic. And I would say, again, one of the things we love about the network is part of the network is literally helping people practice the mission together, sharing what works with one another, providing emotional and social support with one another. That's the kind of, that's what we needed. We'd love to see all of our clients doing that. That's how we help people actually care for themselves.
Yeah, so when we look at our results across the board for the social impact sector, guess what's ranked the least? The lowest? Self-care, right? People don't know how to take care of themselves to that point. And so what we're seeing is the Mack truck's coming for the people that are on the hamster wheel and don't get off. And there's a big impact to that, to business. There's a big impact to our missions and our movements, to our families and our loved ones. So how do you get off the hamster wheel to create more space, to experiment with what self-care means in your physical health, your emotional and social health, which are the principles of Live Yes, right? It's so cool. It's actually baked into what we get to practice. But there's really there's ideas, you all have ideas, but really encourage you to experiment with, what does that look like? How could I actually say no to live yes, right? Because the answer to living a yes life is not saying yes all the time. That's called burnout, right? So we're seeing this across the board of how do we come into right relation, in balance and harmony with our whole selves, which you'll hear us talk about in just a moment.
So we're not trying to say those are the only things happening in the world. Those are 6 trends that are interesting to us as we work with groups like you to help unlock networks. And hopefully there's a couple thought starters there. There's some themes that we're going to come back with, but the last one, well-being, takes us really well into what we want to do next, which is to frame back to you, when we asked you about the Arthritis Foundation, to frame back to you what you said to us. So in the world that we're living, and in the complexity of the world that we're living, we realized a couple years ago, as we would help groups try to improve their fundraising, for example, or create a better long-term strategy. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to realize, wow, there's a lot of moving parts, right? These things are related to one another. Our ability to raise money relates to the stability of our leadership, which relates to whether we're listening to our community, which relates to our staff turnover. And a couple years ago, we talked about, solving for one variable isn't really getting us the answer we want. So is there a different kind of framework we could develop to help people see the interdependencies of these things? And that we call the 5 keys, and that's what we asked you to take a look at yourself regarding. So we want to just walk through each of these keys and explain some of the interdependencies. Then we're going to look at what you said about the Arthritis Foundation.
Yeah, so you all have a sheet. So we're going to just talk about the front first, about the 5 keys. And these are different doorways. It's a holistic view of how we unlock growth for ourselves and for an organization. There's no right place to start, but we'll pick well-being since we just launched off from there. We define well-being as being well. It's really simple. Being well, being you. Discovering what right relationship means, to be in right relationship with your body, your physicality, physical health, your mental health, your mind, your thoughts, and your soul or spirit, that we're something beyond this physical form. And again, just to emphasize, you're so lucky that this is ingrained in our purpose, in the Live Yes network, that we get to practice this, right? But all of us are in discovery. Sometimes we fall out of right relationship. And what the hell is right relationship anyway? We get to discover that, because again, we are all unique. So that first trend of personalization, personalized care, personalized treatment for arthritis, like one way, one method does not work for everyone, right? So being in better discovery of what works for you to be well, to be you, is vital to unlocking growth.
And from a practical standpoint, what we're getting here with this one is, things like we were talking about turnover, or can I take a break if I need to? We all, probably many of you, our work comes in fits and spurts. There's times that you just have to, you have deadlines, there's things you need to do, you have travel, you get stuck in Detroit, all of those fun things. And yet, can you also take a break, right? That's what we're getting at with well-being. Creating that environment of well-being requires great leadership. That's the second one that's here. And those of you who took the assessment see, we kind of go in a different direction of leadership than you might be used to. We don't ask you to rate the people, your boss. We ask you to rate yourself, think about yourself, and we specifically, the theme here is authenticity. Leadership more and more, Jen talked about the BS meter. Leadership is a willingness to be vulnerable, particularly when we're working with networks. Being willing to share with someone, this is why I'm involved. This is why I think you should be involved. And not making it a sales pitch, but being clear on what your own motivations are.
Yeah, and this ties back to well-being, about being you. The days when we have a personal life and a professional life, and those two things being separate, they're over. And it is exhausting to try and keep them apart. You tried? Be one place, one person at home and one person at work. That was an old society. But now in the living in the information age, we're being called to be ourselves everywhere we go, right? And the more we can be that authentic whole self, the more, ironically, people connect, right? We give other people permission to be themselves when we are ourselves, at work and at home. And that's leadership. That's bravery. That's courage that our constituents, our people, are starving for. Organizations are made up of people, and people have human issues. And you all see that every day. We all are dealing with our own humanness. So leadership is about how do we model being human so we can really allow other people to do the same.
The third is strategy. Our take on strategy, just like leadership, is a little bit different. And you can see here it says strategy is about alignment. It's not about plans. And what we mean is we live in a world, again, that's moving rapidly, that's and there's a lot of competition, there's a lot of need for personalization, there's a demand for action. Kind of the traditional strategic planning process of, let's all slow down, let's try to be fortune tellers, let's predict what's going to happen over the next year or two. There's a value to that. There is a value to the process of talking. But I think Plenty's view of strategy and the advice we give our clients is the process is really what's valuable. Because that plan, that PowerPoint, or that huge spreadsheet, or whatever you come out at the end of that process is probably out of date as soon as you put it on paper. Right? Many of us have had an experience, or I've had the experience so many times of doing a budget. It's December, you do your budget for the year. It's kind of an onerous process. It goes through all these checks and balances. And what happens the first week of January? You're totally off. The forecast is wrong. Something great happens that you didn't expect, or something bad happens that you couldn't plan for. So the point is not that the plan, is useless. The point is a lot of the value comes in the conversation. Back to the network, right? Talking with people about, well, here's where we want to go. What do you think? And when we get off, how will we react, right? That's really the key of great strategy when we see organizations that are nimble when something unexpected happens.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that's so constant right now is change, right? And it's exponentially speeding up. So how agile can we be? If we are aligned, we can be incredibly agile and adaptive, right? So think about our boards, our associations, our communities. Really, we're aligned in a direction. It's like we got a compass. And then things happen. Right? How responsive can we be is what strategic alignment is all about, and we really place significant emphasis there. The fourth is funding, and honestly, funding is an outcome. It's an after effect. It's a means. It's the journey. It's not the end. It's like we see when we're focusing on hitting a number, and our groups aren't getting to that number, we're not hitting the goal. Why? It's because we've got strategic issues, leadership issues, community issues, 9 times out of 10, right? So if we focus on our vision, our mission, we give people a reason to care, we ask effectively and specifically, the money will follow. And we're doing so much work in the sector of turnaround. And it's because they're focusing on the number first without mobilizing the means to get there.
Yeah, and what that sounds like, again, you may have had these experiences yourself in other organizations that you work with. We'll go into a client who says, we need to raise $50 million over the next 3 years. And we'll say, why? And there'll be silence. That's not the right answer. We need a better answer than nothing, right? We need because we're going to make a difference, because we're going to fund these programs, because there's this many people are dying, and right? We're not saying funding is not important. Funding is the gas in the tank. Absolutely, we need gas, but we construct the car first, right? You don't buy gas before you have an automobile. So that leads us all the way to community, which, if you're looking, this takes us back to Live Yes Network, and why I keep wanting to say Live Ness, so I'm sorry I keep contracting it. The Live Yes Network, and why we're so excited about it. Our view of community is that's where the wisdom is, that our constituents know what they like. They know what kind of help they need, and sometimes they know a lot better than we do, right? As a national organization, what do we do great? Well, we can consolidate best practices, we can mobilize resources, we can be a convener, get people in one place, help set an agenda. But the action takes place, people don't live in this convention center in Baltimore, right? We live at home. The action takes place out in the field, and our counsel on community is the answers are out there if we can listen. And if we can listen, that opens up funding. And funding helps us dream a little bit differently about the goals that we have. And those goals help us emerge into authenticity. And all of those together feel like well-being, personally and for our organizations.
Yes. So this sets a context for what we asked you. You all were given a survey of rating yourself on the 5 keys of how you perceive Arthritis Foundation doing. This slide is a kind of a bubble cloud, if you will, word cloud, of how you described yourself in one word. So looking at this on the screen, we would love for you to turn to the person next to you at your table and just chat about, what do you see here? The larger the word is the more responses. So have a little conversation. Take about 2 minutes. What do you see? Discuss at your table. So let's bring back the conversation to the larger room. Who would like to volunteer or share? What do you see here? What did you talk about? What do you notice? How do we describe ourselves? Retired, some of us.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Deviney. I'm from the Eastern PA chapter. We were just looking up at the number of words, and I had to say, I'm like, I don't remember doing this survey. How many choices did we have? And we saw that the #1 choice was passionate. And while when you think of how people are going to interact and how they're going to do here, I think it's mostly because we're all driven by our passion for finding a cure for arthritis. And while I think that, I saw hardworking was really small, and I think when you want to be successful, you have to be hardworking. But when we're thinking about this, the Arthritis Foundation, I'm not surprised to see passionate up there, but I also know to be successful, we need all of those other categories to be up there as well. But I think when you think of all the people in this room, they're here because they're passionate about the Arthritis Foundation, but that doesn't mean that we don't have another of 10 other qualities that help us in achieving the mission of the Arthritis Foundation.
Yes, well said, well said. So I'm so glad we put this back up and not my goofy face while I'm talking too. So a couple of comments on that. Our number of respondents was about 60, and I'm doing a little bit of, I think there's probably about 200 people in the room. So say a third of the people have filled this out. If you filled it out, we actually don't give you choice. It's an open-ended question. That's what's fascinating for us. Our total number of respondents to this is a couple thousand. And so we just ask you to volunteer a word. And it's fantastic that about 10 of the 60 people on their own volunteered passionate. That's fantastic. This is a team we'd love to work with. There's a lot of great words up there.
Yeah. Want to take another example? Or
Yeah.
What else? Would anybody else like to share? What do you see? What did you notice or talk about besides passionate? Yeah.
Caring. We have to care in order to be passionate about getting a cure for arthritis in our lifetime.
Lovely. Yes. Passion is care, right? Sharing that, expressing it. Yeah.
Yeah, I noticed that looks like the second largest word is optimistic. So we're passionately optimistic about the future of the organization and actually finding a cure for this horrible disease.
Yeah. What an asset that is, right? When we talk about hope needs help and living yes, like that belief in a better future for Arthritis Foundation and for ourselves and our loved ones, you can't make it up how wonderful that's a strength of ours to build upon, right? To leverage in our communities.
So one other thing before we leave this slide that we just want to point out. What happened to the mood in the room when we asked you to turn to your neighbor? And I've destroyed it by asking that question. But did the volume level in the room go up or down when we said up? Did the mood go up or down? Up, right? Here's why I'm going to keep saying it. Here's why we love live yes, even though I keep getting stuck on how to enunciate it. Right? We prattled up here for 30 minutes. And hopefully it was interesting and stimulating and you're just being quiet and not telling us how great we are. When we said turn to your neighbor and talk, turn to the person next to you, the room erupted. We all have something to say. We all have part of the answer. We all have a perspective. So it's just a little example of the power of the network. And what we're trying to do as an organization is that times 1,000, times 100,000, times 1,000,000, tapping into that energy that we all have.
Yeah, and part of the Live Yes network is connecting to people on the ground and in the cloud, in your words, in person and online, right? So we have to be creative and make the time to connect human to human, because that's where the juice is, right? The online is an awesome tool, incredible resources, but that's not where change happens. Change happens heart to heart, person to person, passion to passion. So encourage you to keep doing that. So the next slide that we're going to show you is how we describe the Arthritis Foundation in one word, again, with no prompting. So take a look at the slide here, what words you see, and have a discussion with your table. What do you notice? And we're going to get a couple volunteers to share what you see. So who would like to share? I'm not sure if that's a hand up. What do you see?
We were actually pointing to send a picture back to the rest of our staff to show them what the screen showed. The first thing we noted, obviously, evolving obviously jumps to the forefront for us, because some of us that have been staff for a long time have seen a lot of change, and we've went through a lot of change, and it's nice now to see that there's a definite direction that the change is going in, and I think that gives a little bit of a more positive spin on it for us.
Lovely. What else? What do you see?
Well, Jill and I were talking, we thought this slide compared to the other one, there was a lot more difference. There was a much more difference in the words on this one.
Yeah.
A wider variation. And we both felt that we would be evolving. That would be an ongoing thing. We should evolve and continue to evolve over time and learn from what we're doing. But we also felt like the Live Yes helps pull everything together and move in the same direction versus this diversity.
Lovely. Yeah, as new people come into the organization and as we grow, everybody brings a different perspective of past workplaces, past experiences, and that perception. It's pretty common to see a diversity in this way with an organization that is evolving. One of our favorite acronyms for HOPE is helping other people evolve. And it's so cool, right? Like, to think if we're really bringing hope to arthritis, we're really bringing hope to loved ones in our communities, we should be evolving. We should be adapting and growing and responding to those ever-changing needs. Yes, we've got a couple of volunteers back here. What else do you see?
So I'm with the New Jersey chapter, New Jersey group here. When we looked at this slide, we actually started talking about the staff and potential, and this is my word, not a word that came up in discussion, but I'm paraphrasing the word burnout. And when I think about who is in the room, and you said about 60 people responded to this survey, I'm wondering if these words looked different, if you've analyzed this word cloud based on volunteers who filled out that survey versus staff, and if the words might be different.
So this is about half and half staff and volunteers, and I'll tell you, we're actually guessing at that, but I'll tell you, I think it's a pretty good guess. So we don't ask you to tell us your role or your name. We do ask for an email address. We have to, just the way the survey tabulates things, not so we can out you later. But about half of the emails are from arthritis.org email addresses. So our supposition, and you can tell us if this is good or stands up to you or not, but is we have about half and half. And I did look at that, and the answer is not really. And you know, before this started, as we were preparing, we had a meeting with Rick and his team, and he said, "Wow, what's your commentary about this?" And we said, "We've done this a few dozen times now. This is probably the best one we've seen." There's a lot. This is an organization, again, I'd say, like, it's going through change and it's growing, but there's a lot to love on this slide. And obviously there's a couple people who are saying, we've got a little more to do here. Our own commentary would be that comes with change. Sometimes things do feel a little schizophrenic. Things do feel like they're a little maybe in transit, but that's really the definition of evolving. So we were really, I think, highly impressed by this slide.
Yeah, and there's a wonderful opportunity to check our, we would say, you'll hear us talk about presence, right? How are we being perceived by our constituents, our volunteers, our chapter boards? How do we want to be perceived? And then how are we perceiving Arthritis Foundation ourselves? And this is that answer for now. And doing another gut check later on to say, how well are we growing? How well are we closing the gap of variety of answers, for example? It'll be a really helpful tool to see. Yes, another observation.
I'm not sure where we think of ourselves on the flywheel of good to great, but this slide definitely looks like you're at the beginning of the curve. There's not a lot of results on this slide. Yeah. The only results may be impactful, but everything else is about what we're going to do or what we are doing, but nothing that we've done yet. So that might be one way also looking at it.
Interesting. Good comment. And to that point, I love that point. We love that book. One of the things we pointed out to Rick, so we did this earlier with only staff in, I think, August. And a word that was showing up now that wasn't then is the word yes. 3 people volunteered the word yes. And again, remember, this is completely unaided. And we said that's congruence, right? That's people starting to step into the network and what it could be. I think this is the only organization we've ever done this with where that word's shown up at all, let alone 3 times. And that feels like beginning to get that wheel going to making an impact.
Yeah, creating awareness. I love that point. We use that idea that you just shared about results. It's really an incredible manifestation exercise. So for all of us to think a year from now, what would we want this slide to say? Pride. I'm proud. Proud as a word, as an example, suggests that we've accomplished something really meaningful, and I'm proud of it, right? What are the words that we would love to be on this slide 12 months from now in accomplishment of rolling out, living, implementing the Live Yes Network, which is really something hopeful to think about. Yes?
Change and mergers and acquisitions that basically I see us in what they call the transition period, and it's the hardest from my way of looking at it, when you don't really know yet what it really all looks like. You're starting to understand and you're leaving the old and moving to new, but it's still like sticky. So I encourage everybody to just, kind of go with the flow a little bit here and try to latch on to what we've learned in this session about the new structure and what we're calling things, which is a big change, but that this will happen more smoothly if you just kind of understand that transition is hard. Do you agree or not?
I think transition is the way of the world. We grow older, our hair changes, our belts seem to get too tight. Like, transition is the way. I think hard is optional. And we'd point out, I'd say again, I'm going to paraphrase or butcher Thoreau here, but I've seen no bad news when I look at this. To me, this is an organization that is past that point of struggle and is starting to look ahead to, I love these words, evolutionary, innovative, important, growing, evolving, rebuilding, dynamic. I think the first time we've ever heard dynamic, amazing. It's fun to see this slide.
Yeah, just to respond too, I think growth is our natural state. It's the natural state of life, and would just echo what Jeff said. Transition, whether it's hard or easy, is a choice. It's all about how we're perceiving it to be. You know, part of what we're being called to practice as humans, as business leaders, as change agents, as idealists, is how comfortable can we be in uncomfortableness? Like, how comfortable can we be with uncertainty? Because there are no guarantees. The plan goes out the window. We're living a direction, we're living alignment with the Live Yes network, and we just need to keep walking to take step by step. But we would challenge you to think about how we go about doing that is a choice each one of us make every day, of how we're going to treat each other. Is it going to be hard? Is it going to lead to burnout? Or is this going to be the most fulfilling movement I've ever been a part of? And how lucky am I that I get to be an agent, a channel for good, for arthritis, for society, for healing? Like, there's a total choice point that we get to practice in each moment. So would just echo, you've got so much to be hopeful for and so much going for you to choose into amplifying that and not get stuck on the schizophrenicness or the words that may seem a little bit negative.
Yeah, and I think the meta point here, again, because we can't say it enough, is, you know, it's interesting to hear two people you don't know talk about their perspectives in the space, but it's really enlightening to hear from everyone around us that we know and care about, right? And that's the metaphor, right, for the work we need to do when we leave, is engaging the people who we know and care about in the work that we're doing and asking them, you know, how do you see us, and how can you be a part of the change that we want to create with you?
Can we move on?
Yes. Okay. So now we're going to, this is the other graph. I said we're not going to get too graphy, but there is one, and to be kind, we actually printed it out. So a lot of you are already looking at it. You have this on your table. If you didn't take the 5 keys, just a brief orientation of how it works. It's 20 questions. There's 4 questions for each of the 5 keys there. That's all the math we're going to do. And this is an order or a ranking of all the 20 questions in order from our average highest to our lowest. And want to say again, just like the word cloud, there's no judgment around this. The idea is not to say we're doing something poorly. In fact, the Arthritis Foundation compares really favorably against the other organizations we've done this with. The point is rather to give us insight into how we all view the dynamics of the organization. So there's 2 bars for each of the 20 questions. The bar on the left is just the overall average score. And you'll see there's a number next to them from, I think, about 4 point something down to 3 at the bottom. Now you see there's a second bar on the right. See that second bar? That's I was lying. There's a tiny bit more math. That's the standard deviation. And oh God, Jeff, why are you telling me that? Here's why. That second bar shows you how aligned we are as a group about our view of the question. So a longer bar on the right shows we have more difference of opinion. A shorter bar shows that we're more aligned. And for us, it's really interesting to just see, so not only like, okay, how did everything rank, but what's our level of consensus in the room about this particular question? Does that make sense? And the point is just it gives us some enlightenment. Now, Jen and I have had a chance for the last week and with the final results a day or so to look at and create some conclusions on our own. You have not. So we want to give you a little bit of time to just look at it with your table, and what do you see? What strikes to you? What resonates with you? And how would you rank yourself if you didn't? What things would be most at the highest of your list, and what would be at the lowest of your list? Make sense? So talk amongst yourselves.
Let's take some other volunteers to share what you talked about. What do you see here from our results? What's interesting? Let's take some participation. Who would like to share?
So one of the first things that I see when I'm looking at this, because I work in marketing, so colors stand out to me immediately. Orange is tied to fundraising, right?
Funding.
funding, same thing. That's a core mission for the Arthritis Foundation, and we're pretty disparate there, so I think there might be some opportunity for us to get some congruency on the role of fundraising, the perception of fundraising, and how it ties back to the overarching mission.
Great observation.
We'll come back to that one. Great point. What else?
What else do you see?
What's at the top? Yeah.
We were really interested at our table that there's the most deviation in the self-care category, that some people are really making self-care a priority while maybe others don't know how or aren't doing that right now, and the need for that when it comes to burnout.
Yeah, what an awesome opportunity, too, to crowdsource the people that are doing it well. Let's learn from them, and how can we practice that for ourselves and then through our programs and services.
And I don't want to lose this point. This was one of our first, we've trained ourselves to look at the positives first. It's hard to do because we all have learned the opposite way. But the confidence in our own leadership is something that really stands out. It's not common. I would say it's not completely unique, but this really stands out. And this is a group of people. And again, the questions are a little bit different. We're not asking you to assess, your management team or your boss. We're asking like, how good do you feel about your own leadership? And this is a group that's really confident, which is what you want when we're evolving and about to engage, an entire country in a network.
Yeah, again, just emphasizing empowerment. Like that, we're powering the engine. And if we are rating ourselves and feeling empowered, then we've got a big leg up in mobilizing others to feel empowered too. And really amplifying that strength within us is going to be key to our growth. What else? What are a couple other observations about our results here? Any takers? Are we good?
I would observe that words seem more interesting to you than bar graphs.
All right, I can't take silence. Obviously, because you said we are trained to look at the negative, right? So leadership at the top, we all feel good about ourselves. That's good. The funding is towards the bottom, and we've kind of discussed like, oh boy, that's not good that we have that perception. But I would also say, part of addressing a problem is knowing the problem, right?
Yeah.
Knowing, and what we've spent this whole weekend talking about is what we're doing to address that through the Live Yes Network and the way that we're going to change the way we interact with our constituents, right? And grow the tent and all that kind of stuff. So I think that's why, I look at this as a moment in time. You have to know where you are to motivate where you're going to some degree. And if we didn't recognize the problem, honestly, then I'd be more worried about ourselves. But having done that, I think we're well positioned and motivated to take the next step.
Lovely.
Yeah, lovely point. And I think that takes us where we want to go next, all the way back to the first comment about funding. That's really the thing that stuck out with us. You just nailed it. And when we were looking at these results, we actually said, Rick knew what he was talking about in naming the session, because I think the title of the session came first from Rick. And he was like, I want you to talk about realizing our vision and how we fund the mission. And when we looked at these, we thought how fantastic that title is, because the three lowest, or we feel that we need the most help with our funding. But look at the one right above that. What's that one, the fourth from the bottom? Vision. How often do you discuss why you are here and your dreams for a better world? And the light bulb went off for us because in almost every case that we have an organization with funding towards the bottom, this vision one's near the bottom too. And our experience, particularly as we live in a networked world, and we're trying to build our own network of care and support and resources and funding, is that funding and our ability and willingness to talk about our vision are completely linked together, right? That's the path to funding, is knowing our vision, owning it in language that we would use, and sharing it with other people. that's what really stuck out with us, is the more that we can give ourselves confidence, the confidence that we have internally, to talk about our vision in our terms and then share that, we're going to find that the funding issues take care of themselves.
Yeah, and emphasizing in your way. So the Live Yes Network has a wonderful mantra and statement. If we just read it, it's not going to land. We need to interpret, we need to digest, we need to personalize and drop from our heads to our hearts, literally sharing from here. That's what's going to help mobilize the funding and the growth. And we're going to cover that in a few minutes. But really, it's so interesting, this epidemic of storytelling. Think about it. Like the people that are incredible storytellers, or you see a movie, they are evoking emotion, energy moving, right? Heart opening. And you all have personal stories that are meant to be shared. And so dropping in, letting go of the garbage, clothing, perceptions of what is somebody going to think about me? I don't feel safe to share that story yet. Like all of that narrative that we each have, we get to kind of experiment letting it go to really connect in a personal way in our own language, our own articulation, our own history, to really connect with people that need to hear our story in a really unique way.
So that's where we want to go next, right? We know we have a need. We know we have confidence in ourselves. We know there's a need. 50 million people have arthritis. So we have a community. We want more resources to help that community. And where we want to focus on is, okay, so practically, how do we talk about our vision when we go home in a way that mobilizes people, in a way that engages people? So that's where we're going to go next. And we're going to hopefully give you some tools. Literally, here's ways that we can talk about our vision, that we can be comfortable asking for support. There's kind of 3 things that we want to cover.
So the first, you hear us, we've talked about it a lot already, about sharing what's important to us, right? Sharing our passion from our hearts, like telling our story. And it's sharing the why behind the story, not just the facts, not just what it is or where we're coming from, but why? Why do we care? That's the fuel that mobilizes, that ignites, that helps people lean forward. Or in my case, when I speak, I get red in the face, I can't control it, right? Energy moving, passionate. People follow passion. We mobilize through passion. That's the first. The second is presence. And man, do we all have a lot to practice here. So presence means 2 things. One is literally, where are we choosing to show up? So where are we present with our chapters, with our communities, with our boards, with our time, and with ourselves? So our presence walks in front of us. Our presence leaves an impression, how we want others to think and feel about us. So we want to be really intentional about what that presence is and how we're giving it to somebody to listen to their story. Not only talking, but literally listening. And then the third is connection. Like Jeff mentioned, we need tools to succinctly, clearly, confidently ask for help. Will you engage? Will you volunteer? Will you donate? Asking for others to care is as important as sharing our care, so we can really grow the network.
So this is our quick 3-step recipe for sharing the mission, for sharing our passion, and unlocking the funding that we want to grow our mission. As Jen said, it starts with passion. Passion's the idea that we mobilize around things that we care about. It was the most declared word, as you saw earlier, from people in this room to describe themselves. And yet, for some reason, sometimes when we're in a place where we're connecting with other people and we know we need to ask for their support, to volunteer, to advocate, to sign up, to donate, sometimes it's not the place that we start. We start with the organization instead of ourselves. But every good ask starts with our own passion. Here's what we want you to do. Turn to the people at your table or turn to the person next to you. Describe why you're passionate about the Arthritis Foundation.
leave the bubble up.
Okay. All right, let's bring it back. So what did you hear? Who wants to share a story? Someone tell us why they're passionate. Yes, ma'am.
She's coming over
I can
with
hear
the
you,
mic.
but we're going to get you. We're going to amplify
Maureen.
that beautiful voice.
Why, thank you.
You're welcome.
I am very passionate because, as I just explained to the table, I never want anyone to have the initial experience that I had with feeling basically alone, not having support, not having anyone that I considered a peer. When you experience this level of pain, everybody's been through some form of pain. So when you say you're in pain, people always say, oh, I understand or I get it, but it's a whole new level of pain, the fatigue, the being able to do something in the morning, can't do it by lunch, can't do it for a week, can't do it for a month, back to doing it tomorrow. So just basically making sure that I'm the change that I want to see in my area so people actually have resources and someone to go and talk to.
Love it. What do we do when someone shares their story?
Yeah, good job.
Beautiful. What else?
Who else would like to share? Why are you passionate about Arthritis Foundation? Why do you care?
I'm Lisa. I'm from Kansas City, and I'm passionate about the Arthritis Foundation because I've been involved for a very long time, and I've seen the difference that it can make in both my life as well as the lives of others.
Lovely. Thank you.
Awesome.
So I'm Susie from Richmond, Virginia. I'm gonna give something of a group answer for the three of us who are all formerly Arthritis Support Network leaders, now facilitators. And two of my friends here said we're passionate because we want a cure. And I said, I agree with you, but I'm passionate because I want better treatments. Because to me, better treatments are a little bit more immediate, and a cure is a lot further out there. And I also said it partly because my experience is I've had lupus for almost 50 years, and that's a condition under this umbrella that has seen virtually no drug improvements in 50 years. So for me, the treatment piece is really part of that pathway to cure, and they're not really separate.
Lovely.
Thank you. Yeah.
Hi there. As a parent of a child with JA, our passion comes from obviously the journey that we've been on as a family, but then all of the benefits that we've received from the Arthritis Foundation, we can't ever repay that. So that's what motivates us every day.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, so Susan from New Jersey again. And following up on, I don't know where the gentleman who just spoke, very similarly, when we talked about passion, the immediate response was some of us at the table have arthritis, others of us have children with arthritis, but then it's about, well, what keeps you coming back to volunteer with the Arthritis Foundation? And for us, we, are passionate about the friends, the connections, the staff, the volunteers, and that's really what keeps us coming back to support this.
Thank you.
Lovely.
Let's do one more.
Hi, I'm Raquel from Texas. I would say I have a strong support system, but when I was diagnosed, it was just, oh, you have arthritis. And then I had to do my own research to find out what was going on inside of my own body after years of pain and symptoms. So it was the Arthritis Foundation that I was able to find out how to get the right treatment, right exercise, tools, and other people who were going through it. And then once I started talking about it in my local community, which is kind of smaller, other people started coming forward. So I'm passionate about other people not being, why am I emotional? Being in the dark about their disease and feeling alone in that aspect, that you don't know what's happening with you. So that's why I'm passionate.
Love it. So, realizing our vision, I want you to key in on words that we heard over and over again in that wonderful 5 minutes. Realizing our vision starts with being passionate about our own experience. How many times did you hear the word I, my, me? We don't have to get stuck on strategy. We just need to talk about who we are. We have to be willing to share that, not only with people in the room who also care, but people who aren't in the room who may not know that they care. When they hear your story, when they hear your passion, they will care. And that's really the simple first step, is being willing to share what we care about in our language and our own experience.
Yeah, thank you for being real. You know, passion is personal. And we put passion at the center of all of our retreats and our methodologies and our models because you can't engineer it. We don't believe you can architect it. We actually have been given this incredible, authentic, real gift that's surprising when we share our story. Where's this emotion coming from? It's coming from a place of deep care that we're born with, or our life experience has birthed it, right? That's helping us be agents of good in some way for others to not feel so alone. And the only way we get to spawn that and replicate that and have passion be contagious is to share it. And that is a really incredible mobilizer for the network, for your role, for your communities. The second is presence, and you heard me kind of riff on that a little bit, but cannot emphasize this enough as we are all living in this digital age where everything wants our attention. And if you're a parent, you have kids, like you get interrupted all the time, right? Our watches, text messages, emails, it's like urgent, urgent, urgent. So to have a conversation and to really be present here with sharing and most importantly, listening to what is being shared is an art. It's a lost art. Like how many times have you gone to a meeting and everybody's on their phone or, you know, on their computer or like they're zoned out? So guess what happens when we're not present? We have to repeat ourselves. When we repeat, we lose time and money. So presence leads to profitability. Presence is proficient. It's productive. And again, it requires us to be really here. So when you're in a conversation, when you're sharing your story, to not only being present with what you're sharing, but being present with your listening. So this is what it sounds like, or looks like. It's like listening with nothing on your mind. Like listening without crafting your response. Listening without judging what you think that other person's going to say or where they're coming from. Like training yourself to have blank mind, blank canvas listening. So you can really absorb the story. And you can listen beyond the words. Where is that person coming from? You know, when I hear that sharing, like I can sense your presence. I can sense where you're coming from in the care. Versus being like, okay, on to the next. Well, I just need to, you know, I'm going to tell you this because I'm more important and now you need to hear my story. So presence is a practice, and we all can do a better job of it in work and life. But as we're looking at mobilizing the community and asking for help, listen, your presence impacts others. It's your impression. It's how you want somebody else to think and feel about you after you're gone, after you've left that conversation. So we're going to give you a little, would you like to share anything else on that before you're gone? Okay. We'd love for you to reflect to the person that shared with you about their passion. What's their presence like? What did you hear from them? If you had to share your impression, what would you say? Make sense? So reverse. Reflect back what you heard to the person who shared. Go ahead. Let's bring the conversation back. Would love to take a couple of examples. What did you hear? What did you sense? What did you say? So what was the presence that you felt from the other person sharing? Or if you were the recipient, what did you hear others reflect back to you?
We have someone way back there.
Hi, I'm Amanda from Austin, and I had two people at my table that were just really awesome. One of the gentlemen sitting with us is a volunteer and an advocate, and when he shared his passion with us, what I heard was tenderness. He doesn't necessarily live with it as a reminder every day, but when he shared that he loves hearing and listening and being on the advocacy side, all that tenderness just poured out. And often that's what people need, is they want to be able to share their story, have it heard and listened to with warmth and patience. And he just evokes that. And then another lady at our table is one of our staff members and one of my fellow colleagues. And often when you're working in an organization, the bottom line is like super important, obviously. But what's really important is having that passion for what you're doing. And sometimes you forget why you're doing what you're doing and why you're having to meet those deadlines. And for her, she has that self-awareness, that beautiful self-awareness that so many of us don't always have. And she realizes that she has to step back sometimes and remember the bigger picture. And all of us that have the disease and live with it every day, she doesn't have it necessarily, so it's not a daily reminder. But that self-awareness is just a really beautiful thing that she has. And I heard that come out when she started telling her passion for us.
Lovely, thank you. Thank you. What else? Let's take a couple more.
Hi, I'm Jessica. I'm from Ohio, and we're sitting with Melita. The first thing that struck me when she talked about her passion was she said that when she was diagnosed as a fairly young adult, that there wasn't a support group. There weren't networks. She didn't exactly know where to go. And the first thing she said about that was that she needed to do something. So my impression from that I shared with her is we all suffer either with arthritis or because of arthritis in some way or another, but there's a difference between people who suffer with it and people who decide we need to do something about it. Those are leaders, and they bubble to the top. So that's what struck me about her right away.
Thank you.
Let's do one more.
Hi, I'm Sylvia Richard. I'm with the Arthritis Foundation, and my two communication partners were Deb Goki, who felt that her passion was when she goes to the JA conference and just seeing those many, many stories about JA families and the little ones living with arthritis, and that's what kind of fuels her passion and keeps her going throughout the day. And then my other communication partner was Jana Lee Taylor, who's been a longtime volunteer of mine for so many years. And I just felt like there's so many wonderful qualities about Jana Lee, but the presence piece is a really good quality of hers. I've had many, many, many conversations with her where she totally clears the deck and clears the mind so that when you are talking to her, you know she is totally present and she's understanding and listening to what you're saying. So I think that's I just wanted to say that about Jana Lee.
Lovely.
Yeah, so realizing our vision, again, starts with connecting to why we care about it and being willing to share it. And then the second part is presence is asking that of someone else and listening. So why are you passionate about it? What I heard you say is, and that leads us to the third step, and it's really this simple, is creating connection and literally asking for support. And whether we're asking for a sponsorship, a donation, someone to just come to a meeting, someone to visit our website and register, these are all asks. We don't enlist people, right? We don't help anyone when we share and they share and then we let them go. We have to ask people. We have to be willing to not feel odd about it, to not feel like we're inconveniencing people. What's inconveniencing people is a life of pain, right? That's what inconvenience is. That's what harms people. Us asking someone else to help alleviate pain is not an inconvenience. So we've given you, this is simple 4 steps because again and again, whether we're talking to a CEO or a professional fundraiser who's raised money for 40 years or someone who's just getting started, everybody gets stuck on this third piece, on connecting. So we have a super simple 4-step recipe. It's actually 5 steps. I'm going to tell you the 5th one in a second, about how to ask for support. The need you're trying to address, right? Why it's important to you. That's the passion piece. What you're doing about it. And then here's a real simple question. Will you help me? And the 5th step, what's the step we left off? What happens after, will you help me? Not yet, something before that. No. I'll give you a hint, it's related to presence. Yeah, I'll be more blunt. Shut up. Right? Not will you help me? Oh, I know you're really busy and you got a lot of other stuff to do, so I can just call you back later. No. Will you help me? So here's an example. Let's say we're looking for a sponsor for Jingle Ball, and what organization would not want to sponsor? You know, like there's only fun in this incredible event, right? So the need you're trying to address. 50 million people in this country live in pain every day, a pain you cannot imagine. It's important to me because I've experienced firsthand, because my daughter has juvenile arthritis. So I've agreed to chair this year's Jingle Bell Run to raise awareness and raise funds for people like my daughter living in our community. Will you help us alleviate the pain of thousands of people who live in our town with a sponsorship of $10,000? Or whatever, or by being a co-chair, or by signing up today, by coming to a meeting, by letting me come back with my staff member to tell you more about what we're doing right here in our community. Like, passion's so critical. Being present is so critical. But then making that connection, that's it. Talking about our vision is the path to fundraising. It's that simple and it's that hard, unfortunately. We can tell you, combined 40 years of experience, there's no like easy win technology. There's no like, well, I'll just buy another $100,000 of Facebook ads. Like that doesn't work, particularly doesn't work anymore. It's about us telling our story, us knowing that our story matters, us believing that other people want to hear that, because they're part of the story too. We said at the beginning that hope needs help. You're the hope helper, right? You're the network. The network starts here. So what do you hope for? What do you hope for? And what's stopping you from sharing it? We promise if you share it, other people will follow and support. They're waiting for you. They're waiting for you.
Yeah, society, each other, we need help evolving, and it's your core strength. So the rest of the day, the rest of the week, weekend, into this next month, the holiday season, keep sharing, keep being curious about what you uniquely hope for. We can't thank you enough for your time, and we're really honored to be a part of your wonderful movement.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so very much. Another round of applause. Jeff and Jennifer, you left me with significant takeaways, and I appreciate the time you spent with us today. All right, this is lunch, but a few mechanical or housekeeping things about lunch. It's buffet, and it's out, and when we open the doors, we should be able to see it. The idea is we get up, we get our lunch, and we come back here. We don't pause outside because we're going to continue the program in just a short half an hour. So please work your way through the line and come back into the room. We have two fabulous things still in front of us, Clark Middleton and Ann Palmer, and you're not going to want to miss either one. Lunch.